See, the thing is, death has no reality. What does death mean? It means that, some consciousness no longer is locatable in the body that we once located it in. So death of what? There have been thousands upon thousands of registered experiences that have gone into the arena of scientific and statistical study about near-death experience, NDE. Now, near-death experience is defined as someone whose body has died and that person's body has been pronounced as dead and expired by a medical practitioner. And yet, by some means or another, the consciousness managed to reawaken the brain and reawaken the body and return into normal function, normal homeostatic repertoire. And a doctor said, not dead anymore. So then what were the experiences of these people? And there are elaborate books and treatises on the subject of near-death experiences. And I would call them actually death experiences because these are all people whose bodies were certified as being dead by somebody who knew what they were doing. And they might include someone who, just from memory, was on his roof adjusting a television antenna, and a part of the antenna hit a high tension power line and 40,000 volts went through his body. He was thrown off the roof and landed out in the backyard. But the direction in which he landed, though it caused his heart to stop, also somehow defibrillated him. And within about a minute or two, he came back to life and then began to report on his experience. And there are many, many examples that are akin to this. Everything from people surviving gunshot wounds, people in war time, even one or two people who survived execution in electric chairs or execution by hanging, but then went on to describe their experience after they so-called died. So what do people describe? Not every one of them describes exactly the same thing, but up to 90% of them describe that something absolutely wonderful happened the moment they became detached from the body that they were in. They almost all describe moving in the direction of some kind of light. They almost all describe going down some kind of a tunnel. They almost all describe experiencing with great affinity other consciousnesses in a place. They almost all describe feelings of complete liberation and absolute happiness. And then, because none of them is destined really to stay in the so-called dead state, they also describe their disappointment at some kind of motivating force, whether it's a voice or some other motivating force, directing them back into their broken body. They end up back in the broken body, and everyone around them is celebrating, but they themselves are thinking, this isn't as good as where I've just been. So what are we learning from this? We're learning that the word dead is a word that we've given to people whose bodies have ceased to function. Others consider them to be dead, but they themselves don't consider themselves to be dead. In other words, dead is not a term that anyone would apply to themselves at any point. I am dead is not a word that anybody's applied to themselves, even if their body has ceased to function. They're experiencing. And so if experience continues after the brain flatlines, if experience continues after the heart has stopped, experience continues after respiration has reached zero, then what do we call that state? Well, we have to call it living. There is consciousness that is still self-aware. It's continuing to experience itself. And so then what this does is it belies the idea that we have that all I am is a body. All I am is a physiology. And when this physiology drops away, then I will either cease to exist or I'll be dead. And I don't know what I'm going to experience. Maybe I'll experience something, but it'll be dead something. We don't have people returning from near-death experiences, not in large percentage, tiny, tiny fraction. but who say it was all terrible. Almost invariably, they can see their body, so-called dead body, lying there. They can see people gathering around it. They can feel, I'm not there, that's not me. I'm this consciousness, and I'm experiencing. I'm not that thing. Now, would it really take dying physically in order to have such an experience? The Vedic teachers of my tradition say no. You can go deep in your consciousness in meditation and experience that layer of you that lies beyond the range of the physical body defining what you are. When your mind goes beyond thought and you experience that vast, unbounded consciousness state, you come out of that realizing that is not a state that can be defined by your physical body. Someone might say to you, who are you? And you might be tempted to say, well, I was born in Kansas and I went to, Kansas Hills High School, and, I had a girlfriend in 11th grade, and, then I went here and did that and studied civil engineering, and that never appealed to me really, so I ended up getting a job as a donut cook. That's what I am. Here I am. Any other questions? Where my body has been is all that I know. But if what you know is that layer of you that transcends the history of the physical body, there's a layer of me that exists and does not depend upon a body in order to exist. It is consciousness that drives the body. Consciousness conceives and constructs this body. Consciousness governs and becomes this body. But the body is a printout. The body is a printout of what my consciousness is. It's not the other way around. It's not that my consciousness exists because of a body. There's something deep inside of us that is the prime motivator that gives life to this body. So that although consciousness is not body dependent, bodies are consciousness dependent. If you extract the consciousness from the body drops. And that's what other people call death, but what is it the death of? When we ask the question, who dies? Somebody might say, well, everyone dies. But we need to ask a different question. What dies? What is it that actually dies? Bodies die. Bodies die, but consciousness can't die because consciousness is not body dependent. This is all of the evidence that's coming to us now. And there are many great scientists who've written very many great books on the subject of death and dying, and the experiences that they have learned from their clients with whom they've sat during the death of the client, sometimes witnessing near-death experiences and people coming back with these stories from those experiences. All of this has led us to have a very scientific way of looking at the claim that death exists and really having to kind of question what the word means. If consciousness doesn't die, what is it that dies? And so death is unreal. It doesn't have a reality. What has a reality is the consciousness field. And the consciousness field is not body dependent. So in Vedic meditation, we can awaken that layer of us that is immortal, experience that layer, and then one day when this body dies, and by the way, in case you didn't know, the death rate so far of humanity is 100%. 100% of all bodies die. Doesn't matter how long the body has lived. You might say, you heard of somebody who lived to be 130 and then died. There are things you can look up on Google, and there's reputedly people who've lived to be 200 and 300 and then died. Maybe if we go by biblical texts, we can see Methuselah supposedly lived to be 800 and then died. Moses supposedly lived to be 500 and then died. The point I'm making is there's no physiological body that's in fact immortal. It's only a question of how long you postpone the death of the physiological body. What is the physiological body in aid of? Why does it exist? It is a means whereby cosmic intelligence can find its outlet, its productive outlet, to bring about progressive change. And we need to find that reality deep inside of us. awaken that level inside of us that's beyond death, and let our body and physiology act as a change agent in a world that desperately needs change. This is the purpose of the body. Forget about death. It's unreal.